Hello, and today we're going to be talking about evaluating AI's role in fact-checking, challenges and strategies in accurately detecting misinformation in dynamic data environments. So, for a brief roadmap of what we're going to be going over today is we're going to be starting with an introduction of what we're going to be talking about, kind of the issues and the problem of why we chose it. Then we're going to go into the literature review and looking over other fact-checking devices that are similar to what we're going to be going over today. A research method based into 3 different points, our findings and discussion section, our conclusion, and then finally into our works cited. So, starting with the misinformation crisis. According to the World Economic Forum in 2023, misinformation is the most important issue in our world today. This triumphs over economic issues, world wars, even nuclear war. Now, according to this issue, there's only 40% of news consumers were misinformed in 2023. While 40% seems like a low number, 40% goes over the constant way that people are constantly reading the news, and that 40% derives from all of the news they've been reading throughout the year, which is a very, very high number and too high for what we need to be going up against today. And also, of those 40%, 76% of users were concerned with AI and its outcomes. And why I bring up AI is because of the birth of ChatGPT in 2022, we've seen an influx of misinformation more than ever before because of its 50 to 60% accuracy according to OpenAI. Now, what if I could tell you that AI, while it being the problem, could also be the solution we are going over today? So, in order to figure out how AI could possibly be our solution, we must figure out how AI works. And in 2017, with Google posting the algorithmic function, attention is all you need, is the idea is if you train an algorithm, the more trials you give it, the better it becomes at transcribing whatever you need it to transcribe. From that being, your algorithm when you're scrolling on Facebook to the text notifications that you're seeing on when you're trying to Google something. All of it is transcribed from this 2017 paper, and everything that you know about AI has come from here. Now, from this, we've derived what we call a neural language processor. When you think of a neural language processor, I want you to think of ChatGPT. This is going in and is turning your query or your question into numerical values and able to match those numerical values to what it has as a memory brain, and then executing a topic or response. Going into a neural language processor is the half point of how we are able to fact check such a material. We're going in and we're turning your question or the statement into numerical numbers and then outputting a process in order to figure out what we're trying to say and how the AI can transcribe the letters or numericals of the statement given. Now, in order to figure out a fact-checking device, we had to start with something a little bit more black and white, or something concrete. So I decided to work with penguins. There hasn't been a lot of research. There is concrete research on what a penguin is and a penguin isn't. And there is no true disputes about its biology or anything about a penguin itself. So this made it perfect to ask it a list of questions and to be able to train an algorithm on something that is very concrete. Now, surprisingly, our penguin project, or as I'm calling it, Project P, had a very, very high accuracy, which proved that with concrete data, we can determine what is right and wrong based on concrete information. Now, our project today that we're going to be dealing with is going to be referred as Project X, which is going in and taking the idea of our concrete project penguins and turning it to something more fluid, such as the Israel-Hamas conflict, something that is constantly changing and ever-changing in our news, and constantly seeing newer and newer developments. The Israel-Hamas conflict being something that is constantly changing is the way for the algorithm to go with something that is equal to what the news and what our news cycle looks like to see if we're going to be able to even fact check the news itself. Now, going into how does fact checking currently work? We have to figure out what we're currently using as a fact checking device in order to create something completely different. Now, the first thing we're going to go over is manual fact checking. When I wanted you to think of manual fact checking, I want to think of you looking at a statement, Googling it in order to understand what is going on. And the most prevalent source or media giant that is using this is Reddit. They have something what is called a moderator system, or a volunteer-based group that is basically going in and manually fact-checking what is being said. But they have to follow the community guidelines, but Who's to say that they're going to be following these guidelines or not? And so the outcome of this is that people's bias are being thrown in and misinformation is obviously being left out and is a huge petri dish of what is and what isn't going on in this area. So on the completely different scope, we're going to look at Meta, Facebook, and its fact-checking tactic. Meta is basically the parent company over Facebook, Instagram, Messenger, and WhatsApp. But we're going to be focusing on their forum-based apps, Instagram and Facebook. And of those two forum-based apps, we have 3.98 billion users on all of those platforms. And of those 3.98 billion, 98 million posts are posted a day on both of those platforms. And you're probably wondering, how do they fact-check every single thing on that area? And the answer is they don't. Instead, they have a 24-hour policy where they basically go in, and if a post gains heavy media attention, around 100,000 views, then they will go in and they will manually fact check or use an algorithm to go in and filter through the post. Now, there are two things wrong with the 24-hour policy. Number one being, who's to say that people are going to go back and recheck or re-see whether or not the statement was true or untrue? Only about 80% of users on Instagram only view a post once, meaning if it was incorrect, they're never going to go back and see whether it was right or wrong. Also, the 24-hour policy also poses another big issue. Let's say about 97 million of those posts aren't going to reach your 100,000 viewer markage, meaning that people are going to be misinformed in very large amounts, but within very small user counts. Now, after seeing the mess that current misinformation poses, let's try and transcribe our research method of how we're going to be building a fact-checking device that can solve for both of these issues on these major platforms. Now, going in, we're going to have 3 stages of our research method: the building, the testing, and the analyzing and understanding of this issue. Now, starting with stage 1, the building. We're going to start with building a file that consists of all information related to the Israel-Hamas conflict. To do this, I basically used NPR News Now and transcribed all information using keywords Israel, Hamas, and Palestine, dating back to its birth of NPR News Now. Because the reason why we used NPR News Now is simply because it's the most accurate and the most middle ground news source that we have on today's records. Now, from this file creation, we then moved down and did algorithm construction. It's built into 5 components. It basically goes in, it reads what you're saying, or reads the statement that it's given, it transcribes it into numbers, matches those numbers with its file, and then gives a base of 100 standpoint of how accurate it is or not based on the file. Now, going into the testing of it, the test material origins is something that was very difficult to come together, but it also came the name to the origins of this project, X. With my advisor, Connor Needham, we built something that basically goes in and transcribes X comments from Twitter X, and basically goes in and it serves as our wrong answers, things that are validly incorrect and don't hold any truth to be told to it. And from them, we also use very factual sources, such as NPR News Now being one, Al Jazeera, CNN, and CNBC are our factual news sources. And from them, we are testing whether or not its guess is correct on the factual sources or incorrect on the X sources. And to do this, we use an algorithm or a network called PyTorch, which is the training network that we use for all AI that we're using today, from ChatGPT all the way to the future like Devin and Nuanced. Now, moving into the testing and understanding. For the project, in order to get something correct, if it guesses that something is correct and it is correct, then it's giving a check. But if it guesses that something is correct, but the answer was actually incorrect, then it's getting an X. And it's vice versa. If it guesses incorrect and the statement was actually correct, it's getting incorrect. If the statement was incorrect and it was incorrect, then we're saying it's worked. So, moving into the findings and discussion. Now, as we look at this graph here today, after 1524 trials, we can see that Project X only had a 60% accuracy. And this was confusing because according to Project P, we were over to get a 98 to 99% accuracy. So something was wrong, or either the fact-checking device didn't work. I looked through the data and I looked through the algorithm itself to see if there was an issue, but I couldn't find anything. So then I started looking more into the data that we used, and I found a serious problem. You see, these 2 posts by Al Jazeera are having the same statement, but if you could look closer, there's 2 different numbers being used. 31,000 people at 3/10/24 and 21,000 Palestinian deaths in 12/27/23. While these posts do look the same, the date is different. And the algorithm that we use to transcribe and gather these posts didn't also gather the date, which confused the algorithm. And so to fix this, I basically went in and I filtered the results and said that any result that required a date in order to be described as, in order to say it was a fact checking or not, we excluded it from the data. And excluding those results, we received a much higher accuracy. And overall, in our conclusion, we saw that Project X hits the 90% accuracy margin with about a 97% accuracy with the filtered data. This proves that with concrete information, we can fact check concrete misinformation, which is great, which means that however, building a larger scale fact checking device also does have its limitations. Number one being debatable topics. There is a gray area between what is right and what is wrong. Some things may have two completely different answers that are debated even today by scientists, individuals, and news agencies. And there's no way we can possibly fact check both if they're conflicting with each other, which can pose as a threat to our fact checking device. The next thing is that news is a story, not a factual analysis. And by looking at this today, we collect the news from our local to our international to tell a story, to inform others, and not just to get the facts itself. And even with trying to tell a story, we're including bias. We're showing things that are incorrect or correct, and we're automatically causing a bit more different rhetoric that can even persuade and spread misinformation. The third are being AI demands. According to Gardizzi and OpenAI, it costs $700,000 a day for ChatGPT to even function. Who's to say that how much it's going to cost for that interface, for the functionality, and for the algorithm to even function at that count with that specific way for it to be even told? And plus, who's to say it's going to work in a very broad point of different news articles? Who's to say it's not going to be confused? This is something that researchers will have to go through in the future and figure out. Now, its implications, though, is the future development for fact-checking devices. I mean, this says bunches. While the Israel-Hamas conflict is a very niche and little topic compared to the vastness of our news and current events, the idea that we could possibly build something bigger means that we could have a fact-checking device that could impact our future. And it also creates a future for possible fact-checking devices. What I mean all in all today is that in the next 5 to 10 years, whether we like it or not, the way we talk about the news is going to change because of AI. Whether it be from, Project X or something else that someone else has come up with, the way that we find the right from wrong is going to change. And what I'm here to say is be ready and hold and sit back tight, because AI is going to make a big break in the news today and hopefully bring solvency to misinformation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Olivia. We now have a few questions about your research process.
Of course.
First question, how did you determine which results generated by your research method were most important in informing your new understanding?
So the research that informed the best in terms of our results was simply, as I said before, the more filtered results that came in from the fact-checking device, meaning that the statements that included numerical dates and times that in order for the device to determine whether or not it's correct was not what we needed in the device, but rather when we went in and filtered those results, that became the highest values and then showed the promising numbers that we needed in order to gather the right results.
What are the real-world implications or consequences related to your findings?
The real-world implications and consequences to my findings, according to our implications, this can completely change the way we see and we talk about the news and current events. And while this is a very good thing and we can finally find some accuracy and determine the right from wrong and stop arguing of what is and isn't real, the other half of it is the controlling aspect of AI. We want people to have still the freedom to talk about what they want to talk about. We still want to have the freedom to have an opinion, whether it be right or wrong. And I feel like with this AI coming into play here in the next 5 to 10 years could impact that future and have some negative effects, but at the same time also have some positive.
Okay, and lastly, how did you handle the uncertainty of the research process?
How did I handle the uncertainty of the research process? It was a very step-by-step method in terms of trying to come together and figure out what was going to, be the outcome of this project. I didn't know whether or not the fact-checking device was going to work. And especially when I got the first results of seeing how low the accuracy was and equivalent to OpenAI's ChatGPT of being about 50 to 60% accurate, it was very daunting and very scary. There was even a point where in my project I was concerned with having to need to start over because of the findings of saying that something like this was impossible. But after going through and seeing that it wasn't necessarily the code's fault, but the way that we haven't been able to transcribe the dates and times of the different posts, I saw that there was promise for the future and promise for the project, which helped me get over that some sort of fear of implication, you could say.
Thank you very much.